Thank you. So good to see you.
You too, Doc.
Very, very good to be here. My apologies, everyone, for my lateness. It was completely unintentional. It's also very good to see some family and friends here in the audience as well, and just take this moment to acknowledge the traditional owners. We're just delighted to be here with the Lowitja Institute in this research translation space, and want to celebrate the leadership of this incredible organisation for facilitating these kinds of discussions, and for also being such an enabler for courageous and innovative opportunities to come about, particularly for families. So the leadership that you've all got and the ways in which you engage and work through and with families and country is just something that has given a lot of us researchers a lot of strength and courage to do quite innovative things. To the other panellists, thanks so much for joining in again today, and I'll just very quickly talk, if I can, about the research translational process that we're engaged with, looking at regional integration, particularly of early childcare services, and the ways in which we work with partnerships. And just to reflect on the conversations around power, this is really around a power, it's about healing power and balanced relationships by using philosophic traditions that underpin both Indigenous peoples plus other ecological thinkers' frameworks actually, and it's looking at using social emergence as ways of being able to initiate and scale regional initiatives, using families as the arbitrator and the centre from which we lead those kinds of discussions. So a lot of the work that we've just got done now in partnership arrangements is looking at multi-sites across New South Wales and Queensland, focusing on what it means to truly be family-led, for families to make decisions, family-centric, family-involved. Those kinds of languages have got their own disciplinary context from which they emerge. They also have a very political nuance that's often played out in policy or programmatic work. And what we're doing in the first instance is developing up a data dictionary just to really talk through what each of those terms means and make them very explicit in the way that we're looking at regional integration. What we're also mapping is then how people feel a sense of empowerment or that ability to be self-determining in decision-makings for their children. What often happens in policy and programmatic responses through government or non-government organisations or any service delivery is that families and family members become a commodifiable resource to those services. And so in the instance where we want for children to go to a doctor 6 times a year and 2 times because you've got the flu, you can imagine how disruptive that would be to a service delivery system that's completely dependent on a high turnover of client presentations, and that a whole lot of the finances get redistributed because of that presence. But when you're self-determining and you're fit and healthy, you have power, you've got control, you've got the ability to support and look after your children, where you feel like you're in a position where you can leave legacies and the like, then that kind of welfareised engagement through service delivery systems is not as required. And we know internationally and locally that evidence says early life interventions are the ones that leverage maximised resources through families, but also then cascade the results of that early life intervention across the rest of a person's life. And so we are really focusing on doing this work. And again, the Lowitja Institute's leadership in this space has been exemplary. The ways that we're starting to do the family level of engagement is with some checklists. Everyone needs a checklist, but it's also a way of being able to make sure that their voices are heard. And when we talk about giving rights of children and the rights of children to have access to adequate servicing and for them to remain in homes, what we often don't do is focus on parents and parents' capabilities to make those things happen for their children. Ultimately, that is the best protective factor that we can have for our children, is to have fully responsible, engaged families and particularly parents. And that is their first right. And so working in this regionally integrated way, healing some of those power and balanced relationships, using different philosophic traditions that have both an Indigenous and a living systems basis, thinking about how you actually co-create networks that are innovative and disruptive. How do you actually connect pioneers in those new spaces? How do you nourish them and then create new communities of intent, and how you actually then illuminate what it is that they're able to do, at the same time as providing hospice services for those dominant, outmoded systems that no longer work, that no longer meet the requirements of people, but who service delivery agents or people within those systems have a high degree of investment in. How do you hospice those out while you're bringing in the new? And there's some really dynamic spaces in which I think we can really do some fantastic work with, through and on behalf of families.
Thanks, Kerry. Wow. Continuing on the questions, we've got some more time if anyone wants to ask a question of any member on the panel. There's one down there, mate.
Thank you. Good morning. That was very, very useful. Indu Balachandran from the National Centre of Indigenous Excellence in Redfern, Sydney. We have just started to put some health research, impact research into place for our fitness centre that we run there. And I'm very curious, as a community-based organisation, we're trying to negotiate, I suppose, evidence-based practice, policy, programming on the ground, community needs, aspirations. And it's very difficult for us to be able to do all that and have impact immediately, which is what we want to do because we work with community every day. Fran's point on embedding evaluation, pace of research. We're currently in progress. Our research project is with the University of Sydney. Indigenous Aboriginal research, a wonderful process, very slow. Any advice from the panel for community organisations that are trying to align evidence-based practice, good practice, evaluation frameworks with immediate need of community?
Margaret's going to talk to this one and be excellent at it, but if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind just having a little go at it first. Just late comers, I've still got the mic, whatever. Stop that now. I've got the mic. One of the things that we're doing through First 1,000 Days is involving tenants of public housing organisations to become peer researchers, and they're part of the co-development of a survey which is focusing on identifying the aspirations of everyone aged 14 and up. What we've also been able to do with incredible success through Aboriginal Housing Victoria in particular is once families identify what their aspirations are, we hook them up with life coaches and mentors to help them achieve their aspirations. And so there is an immediate response. And I think within a 4-month period, they've been able to successfully help over 37 households achieve 200 aspirations. We've also seen then the transition of those peer researchers into full-time employment, and the people that they've been working with have also mobilised into employment and other sorts of strategies. It is a new part of a workforce that I think is underutilised, particularly for low-intensity interventions that have a really big impact on the sense of depression and other sorts of disorders that are fairly easily remediated by that level of intervention. So that's one way in which we've been able to do that work. The peer researchers then become pivotal in doing the analysis to help us understand and contextualise what's going on. And what we try to do is not only work with evidence-based work, but evidence-generative processes that show new ways of doing, thinking, being. And that is not traditionally able to be funded through the mechanisms that are in play for mainstream research agencies, and that's where the Lowitja Institute really comes into its own.